We have a lot to talk about. Let's talk about the Yae Miko banner first. As I've mentioned in my Yae Miko pre-release analysis video, she's likely going to be an alternative to Beidou and or Fischl on teams where you could use them but don't need to use them, especially if her skill damage has significant scaling. And yes, her skills do have significant scaling. These numbers might not look like much, but remember, this is just passive off-field damage. You just put the totems down, swap off to your other characters, and this will just do damage on its own. Unfortunately, it's very single target. It's not very good with AoE, so that's one of the caveats. Now, when I said earlier that she's gonna be an alternative to Beidou or Fischl, I was just talking about her skill mostly, being electro off-field damage. She is, of course, her own unique character, and she has something different from Beidou and Fischl. So because of how her skill and burst work together, basically the way that you would play her is you would put your skills down like this, and then after that you'd burst. And then put 3 of the turrets down again so that you continue to get off-field damage. I still think she's going to be another straightforward damage dealer, which aren't really known for being must-pulls, because almost any character in the game can be made to deal damage, so you can literally decide whoever you want to be your DPS. She doesn't have any specific utility like shielding, healing, crowd control, energy management, etc., other than dealing damage. My opinion on her still hasn't changed. If you already have complete teams that can 36-star Abyss for you and are now just looking to collect characters, go for it. But as for, if I get her, I'll finally be able to 36-star Abyss. No, you can literally already do that with almost any character that is already currently in the game. As for the 4 stars, Diona is a great unit to have. Her C1 is also quite useful because it helps a ton with her energy. Getting her burst back isn't that much of a problem, especially because her hold E gives you so many particles. And most of the time you'd be rocking her with either a sacrificial bow or a Favonius warbow. I kind of see her as like the Swiss army knife of Genshin. She kind of does most of what you need from supports. She shields, she heals, she gives you particles, she's a bow user, for in case you need a bow user to deal with some kind of enemy, like some ruin enemies, especially the ruin hunter. Like let's say you have Kazuha, you're fighting a ruin hunter, you use Kazuha's skill making you fly up into the air, now the ruin hunter is gonna fly up into the air too. And now you have to wait minutes for it to come back down, unless if you have a bow user to just shoot its weak point at its eye. Problem solved. Now you have a bow user that you need in that specific situation, and she does everything else you need from your supports in one character. She may be very useful in certain cases. Now, depending on what teams you have, you may not need or even want her. Like if you're running a Hu Tao team, yes, Hu Tao wants to have a shielder. Like I said, Diona is one of the best shielders in the game, but let's say you put 4-piece Noblesse on her. So you use her skill to get a shield, and you use her burst to get the Noblesse buff. Now you have a healing field that she throws towards the enemies, but the enemies are where you want to go to. So now, you switching to Hu Tao makes it so you have to go in her healing field. Diona heals you to over 50% HP, and now you lose Hu Tao's 33% pyro damage passive. It's not the worst thing in the world, but it's like a 2 steps forward, 1 step back kind of situation. I'm just trying to say Diona is very, very, very useful in so many situations, but she's not someone everyone needs all the time. Everyone might tell you she's great, but you might not need her at all. Fischl. She is an off-field damage dealer, and a good one at that. She applies Electro very quickly, especially if you have her at C6, because C6 makes it so that Oz attacks along with your on-field character's attacks. And she gives you a ton of Electro particles. I'm assuming they probably put Fischl in here because Yae Miko has a really high energy cost burst, and if you're trying to pull for her and you get Fischl along the way, and decide to use them together, Fischl kinda helps out with any potential Yae Miko energy problems. Of course, unless if you have Raiden, Shogun, and you plan on running them together, then of course, let's face it, any team with Raiden on it will almost never have energy problems at all. She's a great unit. Still depends on what your teams are, whether you need her or not. Take the 3 main things I said earlier that she does into consideration to help you decide whether you want or need Fischl. Thoma. I have never used Thoma. I have absolutely no plans on using Thoma. So here's most of what he does. Shielding and pyro application. He has one of the strongest shields in the game, but it comes with a big catch. His base shield strength is really nothing to write home about, unless if you do a good amount of normal attacks, because the way his shield works is its strength ramps up as you do normal attacks. His burst makes it so you apply pyro as you do normal attacks. Scaling is horrible, so you're not going to be relying on it to do damage at all. It's really just there to apply pyro. If you have Hu Tao or Yoimiya as a DPS, you'll understand they have very few options of applying pyro outside of their pyro infusion windows from their skill. It's kinda hard to apply pyro enemies, so you can use your animo units to buff your team's pyro for a while. So Toma's ability to apply pyro and give you a shield, one of the strongest in the game at max potential, can be useful. But only in that situation. If you have a quick swap team like the national team or Morgana or double cryo, double pyro, there's no way adding Toma to any of those teams will be beneficial overall. In fact, in some situations, they can actually be detrimental. Toma is very good in the very few specific situations he's good in, but is he really that good? Let's say you have this team: Kazuha, Yoimiya, Bennett, and Toma. Number 1, you already have Bennett as a pyro applicator, so you're really only using Toma for shielding. If you have Zhongli, he'd be much better in this situation. He gives an additional reduction to all resistances, and his shield has basically permanent uptime with a much longer duration than its cooldown. And you have a bit of crowd control from his burst. So many people already have Zhongli, and a lot more want Zhongli because he's just so much more useful than Toma. You can slap him onto almost any team, and it'd be instantly better. I'm not saying Toma is bad. I'm just saying if you aren't in any of the specific situations I mentioned earlier, where having Toma would actually benefit your teams overall, he isn't someone you'd want to spend resources on getting. It's not a bad banner. It's just that the characters on it are hardly must-pulls. But hey, if every character in the game was a must-pull, what a horrible game it would be, right? In fact, it's not a bad banner at all. I mean, if you think about it, if you pulled a bunch on this banner and got all of these 4 characters on it, you'd have yourself a usable team right here. You have your main DPS, Yae Miko, who may or may not have energy problems, which can be solved by Official, who also does off-field damage. You have 2 shielders, a pyro applicator, Toma, so you could just rely on overload for AoE and a bit of crowd control, and you have a healer, Diona. The weapon banner, though, is a completely different story. 3 out of 5 of the 4-star weapons on it are godly and irreplaceable on some characters. One of it is usable in specific situations, and only one that's completely garbage. Jade Cutter is one of the best swords in the game, mostly because of its insane 44% crit rate at level 90. And it gives a bit of attack based on your max HP too. 44% crit rate is nothing to scoff at. Let's say you have Kaching, and you absolutely love the hell out of her, and quickly realize she's very lackluster, and you're thinking, I want more crit damage on her, so I can do more damage. You switch to a crit damage circlet, and now you have 200% crit damage, but you've only got 30% crit rate, leaving her completely unusable. Add the Jade Cutter in there, and now you have 74% crit rate, and you get some HP and attack too. Kaching's not just usable now, I'd say now she's in an ideal main DPS state. Sure, it's got low base attack for a 5-star, it's only got 542 at level 90, but is that really not worth sacrificing for actually being able to use a character? Because the 44% crit rate gives you the right ratios you need? The only situation I could think of where having Jade Cutter is kind of a waste is if you have a cryo main DPS like Ayaka, and you're using 4-piece Blizzard Strayer. Let's say you have 20% crit rate on Ayaka, and you're relying on the 4-piece set to give you another 40% crit rate, which now takes you up to 60%, which is about where most people keep their crit rate at before focusing on other stats like crit damage, attack, or energy recharge. Add Jade Cutter to it, and now you have too much crit rate. So in that situation, it's kind of a waste really, and you'd be better off with a crit damage weapon, but other than that, it's a weapon that can make any sword user into a usable DPS. Now, as for Kagura's Verity, I'd say it's about as valuable as Lost Prayer and then some. It's got basically the same stats, 608 base attack at level 90. The Lost Prayer just has crit rate, whereas Kagura's Verity has crit damage. Kagura's Verity is at least godly on someone, and is actually pretty good on a few other characters, whereas Lost Prayer is just good on everyone, but as far as I could see, will highly likely never be very good on anyone. You could also argue that crit damage may be more valuable because there's not really a limit to how much crit damage you should have, whereas there's a limit to how much crit rate you have before it's getting wasted, like in a similar situation to the Ayaka example I gave earlier with Jade Cutter. Right now, we don't have a Cryo Catalyst user that wants to use 4-piece Blizzard Strayer, therefore making it super easy to cap out on crit rate if you use the Lost Prayer. But what if we do get one in the future? On that potential future character, Lost Prayer will lose all its value, whereas Kagura's Verity will at least still be usable on them. Lost Prayer also has one of the most worthless effects in the game. In what world in Genshin are you going to be staying on the field with the same character for more than 16 seconds? Because that's what you'd have to do to fully utilize its effect. Whereas Kagura's Verity's passive is at least godly on currently one character, and that is Yae Miko, the character it was literally made for, while the Lost Prayer's passive is usable on no one. Every time you use your skill, Kagura's Verity gives 12% elemental skill damage at R1 for 16 seconds and can stack up to 3 times. And when you have all 3 stacks, you get 12% all elemental damage bonus. The only characters I could think of who can even maximize this effect are Yae Miko and Lisa, and potentially Ningguang. So if you love Lisa and Ningguang, hey, happy birthday! New weapon for your waifu. For Yae Miko? Damn. I mean, it is a weapon literally tailor-made for her, so what are you gonna expect, right? However, if you're a free-to-play or a low spender who won't be able to afford both Yae Miko and this weapon, don't worry though. It looks like Widsith is going to be very, very good on her too. And we're also getting a free 4-star R5 catalyst from one of the events in 2.5 called the Oathsworn Eye. And we also have a bunch of other catalysts that can actually be usable on her, like the Map Amir for example. This one's at R1, so imagine you could stack 8% elemental damage twice. And imagine this at R5, right? So you'd get 32% elemental damage bonus for just doing elemental reactions. Another 4-star option I'd like to mention for the low spenders out there who have the Battle Pass is the Solar Pearl. It perfectly buffs her entire kit, which are her skill and her burst. The only conditions you have to meet are you just have to weave in at least one normal attack before doing your skill and or your burst. And it does have crit rate as a substat, whereas Yae Miko ascends with crit rate. So it's gonna be easy to get the ideal crit rate on Yae Miko, but it'll also be easy to get too much crit rate on Yae Miko if you have really good artifacts. The Oathsworn Eye is really nothing to write home about, but it's got decent base attack at 565 at level 90 and a good amount of attack percent, and gives you a bunch of energy recharge after using your skill. And since Yae Miko has a high energy cost burst, you're going to need that energy recharge. So I'd say Kagura's Verity is a pretty good weapon, and it's kind of a future-proof weapon. It's not a must-pull really, because there are already weapons in the game that make Yae Miko really good, but it is however going to be one of the only ways to reach Yae Miko's maximum damage potential. Overall, I'd say it's a pretty good weapon banner, but that doesn't mean you should still pull on it. You have to look at your situation if you think any of these weapons will change your account and experience in playing the game. If you're a free-to-play player, you'll understand how long it takes to save up enough Primo Gems to actually get any significant character or weapon upgrades in this game. And if you're in a situation where you don't want any more characters and you think your current teams are already future-proof and will be able to achieve your goals in the next several months, I'd say you've earned yourself a reward. You can go for this weapon banner if you think any of your current characters will get a significant upgrade from them. But if you're not in that situation, no. Just no. Stringless probably the best 4-star weapon for Venti and Fischl, one of the best 4-star weapons for a burst-focused child. Sacrificial Sword, best weapon for Xingqiu, no questions asked, unless if you're running Xingqiu with Raiden where you won't have any energy problems, in which case Jade Cutter will be his best in slot. Mihoyo says there you go, you're welcome, it's already on the banner. Wavebreaker's Fin, it's an alternative to the Catch, and in fact, it actually does more damage, especially if you run a team with high energy cost bursts. Rain Slasher. Rain Slasher is actually usable on Diluc if you are able to pair him with Xingqiu for Vaporized Diluc. It'll certainly be a lot better than Prototype Archaic, but maybe better or worse than Black Clef Slasher depending on your current Diluc stats. I guess it's usable on Sayu for the Elemental Mastery. Other than that, I can't think of any other character that uses this weapon. I have Perception. Garbage. Please, don't even bother with this weapon.